Welcome to third spring in the great state of Michigan. I think this is the third time we've had, 70-degree temperatures before it's snowing again, Steve? Am I right there?
Well, possibly, although there may still be some snow on the ground up north because they just got dumped on
Oh my
earlier this
goodness.
week. They got a foot or two of snow up there.
Wow, that's I guess, hey, it helps for the skiing, but I think everyone put their skis away.
Yeah,
We've
I think the skis have been put away for at least a few weeks now, maybe a month.
Yeah, well, okay, so for 2024, here it comes. You sent me something interesting earlier today, Steve, that the World Health Organization, this wasn't part of our news items, but has said that the COVID health emergency is over. We're going to talk today about some interesting ramifications of that for U.S. businesses because, on the one hand, that's really good news. On the other hand, a lot of people are losing their jobs because they don't expect the same number of tests. So I guess everything comes with with two sides to it. But appreciated that information from you. We will be talking all about those layoffs from Thermo Fisher, as well as a bunch of information from FDA's Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories, which is one of the new divisions after the reorganization of CDRH. But we'll get to all of that right after we tell you about the upcoming events when we start MedTech Crossroads right about now. Well, as always, we bring you our upcoming events. We draw it from a bunch of local and national sources, including the US FDA, Project MedTech, MichBio, Ann Arbor Spark, and the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society, as well as our good friends at MEDC when the chance arises there. So let's see what's on the docket in upcoming weeks. The AdvaMed 510K IDE and PMA submissions workshops, May 15th through 25th, 3 workshops coming up. One on 510K and de novo submissions, one on IDE submissions, and one on PMA submissions. If you're online, you can scan the QR code there, and otherwise advamed.org you can go to. MichBio is doing a lot these days. They have just been burning the midnight oil. Their IP and legal expert virtual coffee break happening again May 9th, the second Tuesday of every month from 11 to 11:30 a.m. Get connected with legal and intellectual property help. What a great service there, introducing people. This from FDA on May 10th. If you think you might have a combination product, what's a combination product? Well, it's a product that has either like a device and a drug or a device and a biologic. What is that regulated as? Is that regulated as the drug? Or is it regulated as the device? Is it regulated as the biologic? Or is it regulated as the device? That is what is of focus here, the Drug Device Combination Products 101. How do you do it? I mean, the short answer is it's going to get led either by the drug division at FDA or it's going to get led by the device division at FDA. But they're going to give you a lot of nuance and a lot of detail. You can go to fda.gov or you can scan the QR code if you are watching online. Another in-person event from our friends at MichBio, the BioConnections networking event, along with MyDevice, the West Michigan Device Consortium. It's free for MichBio and MyDevice members, $10 for everybody else at Thornapple Brewing in Grand Rapids on May 24th. So you can catch up with the Michigan biosciences community there. Next up, the Midwest Growth Capital Symposium. This venerable event is coming back, but this time to the Ross School of Business. It used to be held in Ypsilanti. This time it's being held at the Ross School of Business, May 23rd and May 24th. Go to MGCS and then go across the state and visit with MichBio and MyDevice. Make for a great day. Jobs at FDA, the virtual hiring event, scientific and professional jobs at the Food and Drug Administration. As we showed you in a previous week, there's a lot of positions. Some of those are for engineers and technologists. Others are for clinicians. There's a lot of different options there. But as you know, FDA has hiring goals for MDUFA 5, the Medical Device User Fee Act, version 5. and they need to hire people. So have a look for the right kinds of people. This might be a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. You can scan the QR code or go to fda.gov and drill your way down to the jobs. Project MedTech wanted us to let you know that coming up in August, the Midwest Showcase is happening in Cleveland, Ohio. Innovation in the Midwest. Stephen Rapundolo from MichBio going to be there. Tom Shehab from Arboretum Ventures, as well as a bunch of other people. That is coming up August 30th of 2023. And it got moved. I was wondering how they were going to pull it off. It has now been moved. The Michigan Life Sciences Showcase, September 18th in Lansing, Michigan. Again, 5 different topic areas, medical devices included, coming to Lansing on September 18th. Well, those are our events. Next up, we're going to tell you all about FDA and industry news. All right. Well, happy Friday. We've got that up on our iPad here. Today is May 5th. And in terms of FDA and industry news, I want to tell you a bunch today about OSEL, the Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories. If we look at a graphic of what is happening inside of the FDA, this is we'll drop the brightness here just a bit so you can see it. This is what CDRH, the Center for Devices and Radiological Health, looks like. At the top, we've got Dr. Jeff Shuren, who's the center director for CDRH. Under him, this has been reorganized in the last couple of years. It used to be very different. There's the Office of Management, the Office of Strategic Partnerships and Technology Innovation, Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories, the Office of Communication and Education, the Office of Product Evaluation and Quality. Now, that's a big one. That's a big one because guess what they do? They evaluate product and quality. That came as a big surprise, didn't it, after you saw that title? Then the Office of Policy. And of course, OPEC here under Dr. Bill Maisel is responsible for going out there and doing evaluations. There's a whole bunch of subdivisions to that, and each one having to do with different device types. And they'll be the ones coming through your door to do looking at products or receiving your submissions. But today our focus is on the Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories under Dr. Ed Margarison. And this is an interesting one. When in 2018, Into Being did an experiential learning program for FDA, there were actually an awful lot of folks from this division who came to learn from Into Being and from our local community about how we do things. Because their task at OSEL is actually research into regulatory science. What's the best way to get devices cleared? So while we're watching Europe cracking down on medical devices, getting more and more strict, making life harder and harder and harder on new medical devices coming to market, I don't want to sound too much like a fanboy here, because there's certainly things to criticize at FDA, but it actually is interesting how OSEL, especially inside of CDRH, is trying to figure out how to streamline the process. So some of their initiatives, or rather, before we talk about their initiatives, some of their research programs that they're conducting have to do with areas like additive manufacturing, AI ML, biocompatibility and toxicology, cardiovascular, the credibility of computational models. I'm glad they phrased it that way because we sort of know these things have a way of breaking down. Digital pathology, electromagnetic and electrical safety, as well as emergency preparedness, human device interaction, materials and chemical characterization, medical extended reality. We're going to talk about that today. Medical imaging and diagnostics. Favorite of mine, microfluidics. neurology, and ophthalmology. So these are areas, orthopedic devices, there's more. Patient monitoring and control, sterility and infection control, therapeutic ultrasound. So they're doing research in all of these areas. These are areas of import to them. A lot of innovation happening. I'll tell you, a lot of people that come and work with Into Being are working in areas like this. So it's interesting that OSEL is focusing on what they perceive as hot topics in the industry. One of the things that Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories is bringing to the table that's been really neat. Now, I don't think this solves every problem out there, so again, take it with a grain of salt. But they have been doing these regulatory science tools to help assess new medical devices. I don't think we fully understand the impact of these tools yet, but they're pretty new in the field. And they've just added 3 new tools and updated 5 tools. They have, so what are these really? So many times, how you evaluate your product is not a cut and dried matter. Sure, we throw around terms like verification and validation for medical devices. And sometimes it's clear what that means. Sometimes there's even standards associated with the verification of medical devices and validation that allow you to follow the standard and have a pretty good idea of what you're doing. Of course, if you're innovating on a new device type that's really never been done before, you are going to find yourself in a world of hurt. Now, these medical device tools don't necessarily solve novel devices, truly novel devices. But in parts of the industry where you've been thinking about it for a while, they give a way, especially for academic researchers, to provide tools that can help to validate certain parts of your medical device design process. So some of these areas, we're going to dive into one of them in a little bit of detail. But here's an additively manufactured mock spine cage designs for mechanical performance test assessments. So it's a way to better assess mechanical performance for this device class. A lumbar integrated fixation device, best practices for biomechanical evaluation under fatigue loading. Very, very specific, right? But if you happen to be in this field and you need to do fatigue loading testing of a lumbar fixation device, you really want to know about this. In silico breast imaging pipeline. And then some new ones about endoscopes, infrared thermographs. The one we're going to talk about today, the method for estimating the likelihood of wireless coexistence. That one caught my attention. We'll go there in just a minute. A modified dot blot method to evaluate PPE and verification test problems for cardiac electrophysiology modeling software. Okay, so these are the things, you scan them, you go, that doesn't interest me, that doesn't interest me, that doesn't interest me, but one pops up, and of course they have a list of these regulatory science tools. If you go to FDA's website, we've got it linked on YouTube there, you can scroll through all their regulatory science tools. So if you happen to be thinking about a particular device class, you owe it to yourself, just like you would scan through the MAUDE database, right? You'd go through and look at adverse device events for your device class. You'd want to go through these regulatory science tools and find out if any could possibly apply to what you're doing. It's a quick scan, but it could yield some good results. So let's talk about this one. This one is fascinating to me. Ooh, we had another slide that somehow didn't end up in our deck here. Are we going to find it? Is it going to show up? Yeah, here it is. It got put in the wrong place, but well, no, that's not it. I wanted to give you an idea of what wireless device coexistence is. It sounds like a social issue. And in some sense, I guess that was meant to be a joke, but it really is a social issue for wireless devices. Imagine yourself in a crowded room, and the more people are in that room, the harder and harder it is to have a conversation with the person next to you. Worse yet, the person across the room. You could be 100 feet away from a person in an empty room, and you could call to them and have a conversation 100 feet away. I don't know why you would, But that's kind of what wireless devices do. You put another couple people in the room, a couple more people, and just like with the wireless devices, it gets harder and harder and harder to communicate. So wireless device coexistence refers to this phenomena of the spectrum getting used up, cross-talking, and making it hard to hear. We've talked in recent weeks about radio frequency problems in the various radio frequency spectrums, where miscommunication and overriding communications with devices has caused serious adverse events, including injuries. So this medical device development tool allows you to take two things: wireless coexistence testing of the device and wireless spectrum surveys of the use environment, which are both known things, and it's intended to model the likelihood of wireless coexistence representing the probability. Ooh, we just said probability. That triggers something in our mind. That triggers risk. Yeah, this is all about risk. You can use this to evaluate, to complement the evaluation of wireless coexistence and inform the medical device risk management with an estimate of the likelihood of wireless coexistence. So this is a risk management tool. How much testing are you going to do? How much testing do you need to do? Hey, FDA, what do we need to do here? And FDA is saying, you know what? If you think your wireless communications could cause a risk to the patient, do this. Use this tool, and then make that part of your risk analysis and tell us whether you're going to do more testing or not. Now, this was done with Zigbee and realistic Wi-Fi sources of unintended signals. Of course, that's what gets you in trouble. And it's not absolute, like they said above here. It complements the testing, evaluation of wireless coexistence. But it sounded like a really, really useful tool. If you have a device that's using wireless technologies and it depends on those wireless technologies for the functionality or safety of your device, you would want this tool in the very near future. There are ways to get hold of it and contacts here on this page. But if you look in YouTube, we do have the link there. So those are the kinds of things that OSEL, the Office of Science and Engineering Laboratories at FDA, is thinking about. They are also working on this, a medical extended reality program. Research on medical extended reality. What is that? What is medical extended reality? Well, it's like augmented reality and virtual reality. And people are working on this like crazy. They cite surgery, diagnostics, and therapeutic uses for this. But they note that because the pace of development is so fast, the evaluation of the devices has significantly lagged. So the regulatory burden is going up. And what they are doing is calling out the gaps. Where is this evaluation process not all that it could be? They cite a few different areas. Platforms that lack characterization and evaluation methods. The use of consumer-grade sensors, accelerometers, inertial movement units, and cameras used by MIXR platforms that have not been validated for the clinical contexts of use. So a lot of times people grab something off the shelf, it's usable in the consumer world, but it hasn't been validated. How are you going to validate it for its intended use? So many times it's this idea of validation. It's the entire reason that the FDA exists. It's to prove that things are safe and effective, that when we sell a medical device, it actually does what we say it does. But that model is being challenged by the rapid pace of innovation. And when you incorporate parts into your device that have never been validated, it gets that much more complex. And there are few or no assessment tools for usability of the device, such as the cognitive load. Yeah, that's true, because if you've ever used a VR headset, you know that it's a lot like reality, but it's different. So they cite research in the following areas that they are focused on: image quality, sensor characterization, interventional procedures and surgical applications, quantitative measurements for usability, cognitive load, and cyber sickness. Yeah, if you've ever been inside a VR headset, you know it's not, it can be hard on your stomach. Methods and tools used to characterize the display hardware. Data that assists in identifying acceptable claims and validated technical capabilities. Metrics are necessary for evaluating the safety and effectiveness of emerging MXR devices. And again, they bring up cyber sickness again. Because honestly, if you have a device that only a part of the population can use because the rest gets sick, we really haven't succeeded here at our usability goals. So not only is FDA focusing on this, but they are focusing on it through this MXR Center for Medical Innovations in Extended Reality. This is a partnership between the FDA and the University of Maryland, Baltimore, and, believe it or not, the University of Michigan, right here in good old Ann Arbor. So there's a few people associated with this. The team, Dr. Varshini, Dr. Murthy, and Dr. Reddy. And Dr. Reddy is the partner site PI here at the University of Michigan. It'll be an interesting discussion to have. We haven't only just recently learned about this since the news broke with FDA. So it's neat to see Michigan in the ecosystem thinking about how to use augmented reality and virtual reality in solving these problems and working with FDA on it. So good for them. Now, this is not from OSEL, but we're going to talk about it anyways. Antimicrobial resistance and medical devices. You know, the rise of things like MRSA in hospitals is a big issue. What you may or may not know is that all antimicrobial susceptibility tests are medical devices, and they are reviewed and cleared by CDRH. So if you want to figure out whether a antibiotic or other antimicrobial agent is effective against a particular microorganism, you're probably using a test that's regulated by our friends at CDRH. Now, the agency mentions here that at least 2.8 million antimicrobial resistant infections occur, and more than 35,000 people die as a result of these antimicrobial resistant infections. In other words, you got a bug that can't be killed by what we're giving you. The UN considers it a global threat. Now, they try to link this to poverty numbers, and I won't necessarily challenge that, but they say it could force up to 24 million people into extreme poverty. And so what do you do about this? Well, here's a strategy. Now, as I read through this, I have to say, I don't know how this is getting paid for or who's exactly responsible for it. So that remains to be seen. But if this is an area of interest for you, I'd encourage you to dive deeply into the links we've provided, especially if you're making a device to test for antimicrobial susceptibility. But they're saying, let's not change our clinical practice. If an infection occurs, give an empiric therapy. Right? Do what you were going to do anyways. Give them the antimicrobial you would have given them. But let's take the sample from the patient and let's actually double check what is going on. Let's find out if the bug is susceptible itself to the antimicrobial that we've given. Then adjust the therapy based on the test results, and hopefully we've got a patient who can now respond to the treatment that has been given. So this is the use of antimicrobial susceptibility tests. And because these can be grown and cultured, you can then test them against antimicrobial agents. So FDA actually has what's called an action plan, a national action plan for combating antibiotic-resistant bacteria. We're not going to cover that today, but if you're interested, That is something that you could take a look at. We have not seen in our own practice a large number of people bringing these kinds of tests to the forefront, but I think there may be a growth in this over time because people do want to know, am I giving the right treatment for this? Because I know that giving antibiotics when it's not doing anything just makes bugs stronger against those antibiotics. So this is a really cool area. FDA is trying to lead the way here. And obviously companies out there looking at ASTs and working to create things that are going to help reduce the usage of antimicrobials, or at least if they're used, to use the right ones. Can't hate that. This news item from Thermo Fisher and from our friends at MedTech Dive reporting on Thermo Fisher. We're just showing you the report here by Susan Kelly from MedTech Dive. Thermo Fisher plans another round of layoffs in California as profits fall. So as we were talking about earlier, the WHO has said that COVID is no longer a world health emergency. And as we look at these 218 jobs that were lost and 3 San Diego area facilities being closed. Why? Well, because Thermo Fisher doesn't expect customer demand for COVID-19 testing products to return to previous levels. We've seen COVID testing groups shut down left and right. They say, at MedTech Dive, they say that the layoffs continue to plague the medtech sector, with 3M late last month announcing a further 6,000 job cuts. Medtronic in April said it planned to reduce its full-time global workforce as well. So there's a lot of scaling back happening. Amazon was doing a Halo Health wearables, and they have shut that down and laid off the employees from that. So yeah, not a lot of great news there if you're associated with testing, especially related to COVID, but not limited to that with, Halo Health coming to an end as well. And finally on the show today, this one we're going to spend a little bit of time with decentralized clinical trials. Now we've often noted on the show and in our own practice that clinical trials are not always necessary, right? If you're doing a 510K for a device, many times clinical trials are not necessary, but people still like doing them because they can provide information to users that help you to sell your device. So in focus here for this draft guidance, this is a draft guidance, includes devices, not only drugs and biological products, but also devices. Talking about decentralized clinical trials. If there is one issue, that we have seen in our own practice at Into Being, it is enrollment in clinical trials. Develop the prototype, ramp up to a manufacturable product, do all your testing, get an IRB approval, get IDE if you need it, and then design your clinical trial. Design your clinical trial, then get your IRB IDE, and then come to a screeching halt because you can't enroll patients. So enrollment is a huge challenge. How can you make that better? How could you improve the enrollment profile? Well, one problem is that if we have to have a hospital where everybody goes, we'll draw some pictures here. It'll be fun. We'll have a good time with this. This is my hospital. Doesn't look much like a hospital, does it, Steve? I think I need remedial art classes. We're gonna try that again.
Is this the remedial art class right now?
This is you're watching Gene do remedial art and they can't even make something erase, but that's okay. We'll roll with it. Here's your hospital. I don't think that was any better, but that's because I needed a house over here, because this is an important part of what we're going to be saying. If I have to bring all these people, if I got to bring these people into the hospital, and these aren't just the patients, it is the patients, right? But it's also the healthcare providers who need to do this clinical trial, and all the other personnel. who've got to come to this hospital, right? That is an awful lot of a burden to bring all those people in the same place, to coordinate them. It's hard enough when you're just giving care, but then to add on top of that care a clinical trial makes life hard. So then the question becomes, what if we could just let an awful lot of those people stay in their homes, never even come to the hospital? What if we could leave them in their homes, or maybe some kind of a regional center? What if we could take healthcare providers who happened to be local to their home and let them participate in the clinical trial? What if we'd only left some of the staff that were necessary at the hospital? That would actually decentralize. This is the point, decentralization, right? We're moving away from the hospital. It would allow us to decentralize the clinical trial, hopefully get better enrollment, better compliance, and everything else. So instead of requiring everybody to be here and to make sure that everyone showed up there, which is really, really hard to do, what if we could let people do it from the comfort of their own home, et cetera, et cetera? So let's look at what's being proposed. Just what we said here a moment ago. In fully decentralized clinical trials, all activities take place at locations other than traditional trial sites. Might be at the homes of trial participants or local healthcare facilities that are convenient for the trial participants. They also mention hybrid decentralized clinical trials, where some are at a traditional site and some are at other places like the participant's home. They mention all the problems we just talked about, things like recruitment, enrollment, and retention. Because if you have a trial that goes on for a while and you can't keep people enrolled in it, even if you can get them enrolled at first, we haven't solved the problem. You didn't get your data at the end of the process. They also say that it might be appropriate for investigational products that are simple to administer or use and have well-characterized safety profiles. I guess if we're going to test a new imaging modality that requires $1 million install in a healthcare facility to even be able to try the thing, we're probably not decentralizing that for the most part. These tend to be things that we can send home, train people on, send to regional test centers and things like that. So they talk about the design of DCTs. Telehealth features prominently, the use of telehealth for doing this kind of a thing. Again, sending not only devices to persons' homes, but also trial personnel. Well, yeah, why not? Why force everybody to come to the hospital? What if you can have the trial personnel go to people's homes? It could also be that people who are located close to the trial participants' homes, but are not part of the trial personnel, so just healthcare providers who are in the ecosystem, but could be called into service. What if they were part of this? Now, it says that they can't provide services that are different from what they're qualified to perform. You don't want healthcare providers going way outside their expertise. But if they are qualified to perform certain techniques, why not let them participate in the trial, even though they're not normally officially part of it? And so they've got safeguards and things like that. But what I thought was really interesting is you gain something, you lose something, right? If you send everybody to the hospital and you have your procedures in place and you've got your workflow there, you can be very, very efficient. There's something that you lack when you decentralize. You need a better idea of how that data is being handled. So to account for the multiple sources of data collection in a distributed clinical trial, the sponsor should include the following in a data management plan. So we gain something by making life easier on the participants, certainly, that helps with enrollment, but now we're going to have a way to manage all this data. So we just took a burden to ourselves that is this data management plan. And they talk about roles and responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. But that's basically what's going on here. This idea that if we could just, let's go back to our fun picture. This is where artificial intelligence art comes in. I should really be using one of our favorite AI programs. Instead of centralizing on the hospital and saying all the stuff's going to happen at the hospital, We're asking, can we decentralize on the homes or other locations? And can we allow even the healthcare providers who are in the ecosystem and wouldn't normally be part of the clinical trial to participate in it in a meaningful way that allows us to not have to do it all in one place? The penalty for that, or not the penalty, but the additional burden that probably wouldn't be there normally, is this DMP, or data management plan, that's going to have to be created so that you can manage all of that. I did think this was really interesting. As we talk about community health and population health, especially in the great city of Detroit, I know that's a passion, even including folks we've had on the show, Dr. Philip Levy, and others, and Dr. Philip Ola. How could we incorporate this in an ecosystem like Michigan's ecosystem? Could we hold ourselves out there as a state, right, as a place to do these distributed clinical trials? Would that help our population? Would we have quicker access to potentially life-saving treatments if we would consider this? So something I want to bring to your attention. This is a draft. I believe it's still open for comment. I didn't check that. We don't have the address here, but if you go to the link, you'll be able to get back to this PDF that I have been marking up with all of my scribbles, and you can go and comment on it. I think some of the emails are right here, in fact. And if something you'd like to say about it, or you'd like to get involved in such a way that as a state, people start thinking about how are we going to take advantage of this and bring the testing of life-saving treatments to our own population, could be a cool thing, and right into people's homes. So it's good to see FDA innovating on that. Well, that's about all our content for MedTech Crossroads today. I got to say, we really, last week's show was really well received. I was absolutely shocked. The views on it just really started racking up afterwards. Kind of amazing. So our coverage, I guess, at MedCon was good, and people enjoyed it. Yeah, and we're just looking forward to. I'm really hoping we get back to some interviews. We've been deficient in our interviews, but there's so many cool people in the ecosystem to talk to. We're also finally back on the bandwagon of indexing. If you look back, I'm just going to go here, and we're gonna take a look at it here. Give me 1 second, and I will have Steve bring this up in just a second. Oh, we're trying to find it. All the people listening on audio are like, what just happened? He went away. We are going to find this here somehow. Well, we're having a hard time. We're having a hard time bringing it up here. Maybe we can bring it up right over here. Something I wanted to show you about how we are doing this now. We are chaptering. So I know it's been hard for folks to find what they wanted to find on our videos, and we are going crazy here, folks. This is going to be, I think, a good thing for everybody. Here's what last week's show. We'll bring this over to the other screen here. This is what last week's show now looks like. Okay. So in fact, look at all the chapters here. If you want to go back and find the virtual hiring event from FDA, that's accessible right here. Are we showing this, Steve? It is showing up. Cool. If you want to hear about FDA eStar, you can go back there. Minute 29:34, AI and machine learning, you can get to it. All of these things accessible. So this is the way the indexing is now going to be happening, and we're going to get on that retrospectively. But hopefully very useful to people as we move forward. So with that, we're going to give just a minute to see what, if any, comments folks have. If there's any events coming up that you would like us to know about, we will take a look here both on YouTube and in the Zoom room. Got a hand from our friend Ken Spencer. Ken, love to hear from you. Oops, wait 1 second. We'll hear from you momentarily. All right, let's see if we got you.
Yes, Gene, thanks. Another great episode there. Appreciate it. A question on the announcement that the epidemic is ending
Yeah.
here. So does that mean that people who are operating under an EUA are immediately cut off from the marketplace at that date?
Oh, that's a great point. You know what, Ken, we'll take as an action item to bring more in depth on that because there's been a lot of flurry around that, and we can actually bring that up as a more in depth thing. So I'll take it from you as a longtime partner with us on this to dive deep. But here's what I do know: when the EUAs were put in place, they were set to expire with the end of the U.S. public health emergency. So the WHO announcement is not necessarily related to that. Of course, it's reflective of it. The US, I believe, ended that public health emergency a while ago. What we need to check to answer your question fully is where we are in those grace windows for transitioning to more traditional 510Ks and things like that. But that window is rapidly closing. So I'll take it as an action item to bring some of that information on a future show. Because I think it's a good question. There are still people out there who are like, well, I was selling under an EUA and now where am I? So we can update that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Always love to hear from you. We'll give a minute more in case anyone else has any questions, comments, local events. Tell us about those local events that we missed because we want to keep that in front of everybody. We appreciate all the interaction. Got some viewers on YouTube there checking in with us. We appreciate everybody on Zoom and on YouTube spending the time with us. We are also working to bring up our, we got started with Podbean. We've got episodes hung out on Spotify, Apple Music, and Google. And we're a little bit behind catching those up, but we actually have the the workforce now finally on catching those up. So we're excited to be able to bring you all of that in a more indexed format. So you can go back, as many have told us and said, you know, I like to assign these as homework for people that I'm mentoring, and we want to make that more accessible for everybody. So not seeing any more comments, I just want to thank you all for being here on MedTech Crossroads. We will see you next Friday right back here at the same time, same channel. Have a great week, everybody.